It's Gideon over here.
Peter Lawler over here.
And welcome to Cricket et al., your independent cricket podcast. We're all going to go all meta today. We're going to talk about a podcast on the podcast. You like that? Okay. And a Substack. Yeah. So we were recently down at the Phillip Island Festival of Stories when we were asked to speak on the subject From Murdoch to the New Media, which describes our trajectory into the Substack and podcast space. And we witted on for about, 45 minutes about what goes into the sausage.
They had to stop us.
We went over. Yeah.
We went over.
We got on a bit of a roll.
We had a microphone and an audience.
Our favourite subject, talking about ourselves.
Yeah.
And but we just thought you might be interested in the additional insight into the method behind the madness of Cricket et al., both written and oral. So there follows 45 minutes of us talking to each other. Unfortunately, we don't have any video, but you're not missing out on much. The audio is not bad. We recorded it on the pod machine, so it's come out okay. What was your takeaway, Pete? What did you think of the event?
I really enjoyed those events.
Me too.
I like looking out and seeing a predominantly female audience, which is unusual when you're talking about cricket, because I know, God knows, when we do those events in Sydney and other places, the gender balance is a bit different.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Yeah.
But
and it was nice to catch up with you and Janine, and nice to go to Phillip Island on a wet weekend.
Yeah. Yep.
Had a lot of wet weekends around here lately.
Here in Sydney, great festival. Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much for the invitation.
If you haven't been to Phillip Island and you want an excuse to go, that's a very good excuse to go.
Yeah. Okay, after the jump, more of Cricket et al. On Cricket et al. It's Gideon Haig over here.
Peter Lawler over here.
And welcome to the Phillip Island Festival of Stories. Pete and I are journalist man and boy. I think it is over 70 years at least that we've been in the trade. We were
it's going to be 80 nearly.
Probably is, yeah. I mean, we're thoroughly assimilated, thoroughly acculturated. But over the last couple of years, we've stepped out from the penumbra of legacy media to take our show on the road, as it were. We have a website called cricketetal.com. We have a podcast called Cricket et al. You can see it on YouTube, listen to it on Apple and Spotify. We have our own variety of independent projects. We're members of the Self-Unemployed, and we like it too. We like it a lot. It's been a complete accident as getting to this point. None of it's planned. Not even this is planned. I'm not quite sure what we're going to say, but maybe when I'm worried about what I'm going to say, what I do is I say, Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's pretty funny, isn't it? The sort of dinosaurs like us from the legacy media, we sort of spat out, and we're now part of the new media. Yeah. But I don't think we've ever had so much fun. And in a way, I think we're a personification of what's happened. I mean, we were just old enough to live through the grand days of newspapers. We're both newspaper men, really. We sort of do vaudeville now, but at our essence, it's newspaper. It's writing yarns is what gets us going. Writing stories, breaking stories, doing things for readers. We in the halcyon days when newspapers and the media industry was really rich, we lived that lifestyle. I caught helicopters to stories, for God's sake. I hired a private jet once to take a photograph. We could burn money. So along came the internet, and in some ways it was good for newspapers, or it was good for news, because suddenly news could get out there instantly. It was great for news journalists because you were never beaten for long anymore. In the past, if you got beaten by your competitor, you were beaten all day and you had 24 hours of shame before you could catch up. Now it's about 2.4 seconds. You just cut and paste and you go. But unfortunately what happened is it broke the business model.
It did, yeah.
Journalism, as we know it and that we grew up with, is broken, and it's for one reason. the advertising left. I mean, stories were only ever to pad out the advertising. You would all remember the Age on a Saturday. I used to be a paper boy. I used to curse that newspaper. It was so thick. And that was just the rivers of gold. They've all gone. Yeah. And with them, it's coincided. I'm not sure if it's a function of or it's a coincidence, but I think a lot of trust in traditional media has gone too. Yeah. Newspapers, newsrooms have become ghost towns. I joined the sports department and had 34 people in it at the Australian in the early 90s. When I left, there were 3 people in it. I did a whole summer.
And it doesn't exist anymore.
No, I did a summer where I felt like I was, those guys from the USSR who went up into space and then the Soviet Union collapsed and they had no idea. I was ringing the office. I didn't have a sports editor some days. There was nobody in the office. Seriously, they would press gang somebody in late in the day, say, go and put the sports pages together. So there's been an incredible change in journalism over time. And somehow we got spat out to doing vaudeville.
Yeah. What happened was the technology meant that the barriers to entry were lowered. Anyone could get started, but making money out of it was next to impossible. So it's easy to get going, but very hard to make a living. Now, Pete and I were fortunate that we had worked together for many years. Pete had been at News Limited. I think, when did you join News Limited?
1987.
1987.
Okay.
So I started at The Age in 1984. I became a freelancer in 1995. And then in 2011, I signed a contract to be the cricket columnist for The Australian. Pete was already the cricket correspondent. So we began to work together every summer for the ensuing sort of 12 or 13 years. And it just so happened that we really enjoyed working together. We got a real kick out of going to work. We saw a lot of good cricket. We went to some interesting places. We had a great time. The only problem working with Pete is sometimes that he's more entertaining than the cricket that you're actually watching.
And easily distracted. So that goes to the territory. But, we spent a lot of time together. Every day and basically every evening. The day would be spent talking about or watching cricket. The evening would be spent talking about music or about books or what does Mum say? Two cheeks of the same arse.
2 cheeks of the same arse. Yeah. So we about when was it? It was about 2021 or something like that when we started doing Cricket Etc. The podcast.
I remember the day I said to you, we were walking to the ground in Birmingham one morning, just that usual shit that we talk all the way there. And I said to you, that because we got onto a fascinating topic that we've still never actually discussed on the podcast. We're not ready for that yet. But I said we should do a podcast. And I think we came back and started, was that 2019?
Well, that would have been 2019, because we were doing the pod by 2023.
So, put up your hand if you haven't got a podcast, frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really interesting sort of development I find now. It's old media, just repackaged. It brings the podcast. I reckon it's more fun than I've ever had in journalism, and it's a more direct and intimate relationship with your audience. As I said, it's an intimate meeting. I remember, my mum listening to whoever was on the ABC radio in the morning, and she always have a relationship with that voice and becoming sad when they left. And that's that similar thing that's happened with us. Obviously we know our shit. We've been doing cricket so long, there's probably not a better cricket writer in the world than Gideon. I always say it's like batting with Bradman. I just get off the strike and give him another 5 balls in the over. Where was I going with this? But we have we know our cricket. We've been doing it so long that people sort of think, geez, well, they must know something because the people that are writing cricket now grew up reading our stuff. Yeah. But there's an added element with the podcast, and it talks about that relationship that we have. It becomes a bit of a bromance thing, and people get invited into it. Yeah. We don't script, we just talk. And you find this thing where people actually think that they're part of our lives. During the Ashes, it was ridiculous, wasn't it? The amount of feedback that we got. And we got an email that sort of summed it up to me. We had Bernard Fanning, the lead singer of Powderfinger. He came down one night and did a podcast with us.
Yeah, that's right. In the Black Dog. Yeah,
the Black Dog in Vauxhall. And someone said, "Look, I love Bernard Fanning and I love Powderfinger, but this podcast is you, me, and Gideon. This guy wrote, and it's really interesting. You never got that sort of intimate relationship. Perhaps writing for newspapers, and I think the other part of it now is because it's not just a website; it's actually a Substack. It's a newsletter. Yeah. I like the old where it lands in subscribers' inboxes. That's become an intimate relationship too now.
It has. So what happened was we did cricket, etc., for a few years at with News Limited, and up to the end of the English tour of 2023.
You know how many podcasts you did? You just brought it up the other day. It's 300 or
something like that. Some ridiculous number of podcasts.
And they're very indulgent.
And often they would be us on the road, just killing time, like going to different places and filling lay days and taking the recorder with us.
We go to the theatre, go and record in the
Chinese restaurant, go to the toilet museum in Telly, go to the giant sewer in the UK, the Crossers engines. Once walking home from the test match at Headingley, we decided we'd do a live podcast as we walked back to the hotel, and we got hopelessly lost on the way. So I had to keep talking while you looked at the map to see if we could find our way back.
The documents, perhaps the grumpiest man ever on a podcast. But that adds to this is part of the thing that the podcast and the Substack do together is we take people on the road. It becomes an experience. The people who can't be in England or India or the West Indies, they wake up in the morning and hear us, on a train somewhere or stuck in traffic or.
Yeah, so in 2023, I decided I was going to leave the Australian, but I did think that Pete and I might continue the podcast independently. When we asked News Limited whether we could use the brand name Cricket, etc., in that very charming way that News Limited had, they said, well, they didn't say anything actually. They just in that sort of almost Soviet style niet. They nixed that idea. So I went off and I decided with Sam Perry from the Great Cricketer, another cricket podcast.
New media,
proper people who really know what they're doing. We thought we'd set up a Substack, and a Substack, if you're not aware, is a kind of an online publishing platform which allows you. Remember blogs? Blogs. People remember blogs. Okay, well, it's a Substack is a subscriber blog. You subscribe either paid or unpaid. You have different tiers of membership, and the piece is delivered into your inbox when we write it. So Pete was still at the Australian at that time, but he decided it wasn't fun without me anymore. It was really rather touching.
The loneliest summer of my life.
And I said, look, we're ready over here, Pete. We'll embrace you with open arms. We've called it Cricket et al. It is all set up for a podcast as well. So we now have the operation basically going in these two sort of silos: the Substack, which is our written work, and the podcast, which goes on YouTube and also on those other podcast platforms I mentioned.
And it's not just cricket, is it?
It's not just cricket, no. It was interesting, the name Cricket, etc. was given to us by Chris Daw, the editor-in-chief.
Well, I came up with the name, but he insisted it be spelled out.
He felt that it be spelled out. Yeah. But as was wisely pointed out to me on one occasion, Cricket, etc. just means cricket and more cricket.
That was that night we were in Chennai.
That's right, yeah. And Cricket et al. Was a much better name because it's cricket and the rest. So we like lots and lots of different things. Cricket is just one part of our busy, fascinating, cosmopolitan life.
We think it's fascinating.
We think it's fascinating, and we hope that you share the fascination. Yeah. So we've started writing on all subjects, and there has been enough support, gratifying degree of public support, for us to basically replicate a cricket writing or a journalistic operation between the two of us. We recently we covered the entirety of last summer in Australia, the Border Gavaskar Trophy. We both went to the World Test Championship final recently in the UK, and Pete went on to the West Indies, and we'll be covering the Australian Test Summer this year. So the sums of money are not huge, but they are sufficient, and the operation is sustainable. And what really sustains it, as Pete said at the outset, is how much we're enjoying it. It's just so much fun not working for News Limited and working for ourselves instead.
Yeah, we again, it's an absolute fluke, but I think that in the sort of the decline of the traditional media, one of the things that we have learnt in recent times is that we have to pay for stuff. When we first got the internet, I remember, and it was one of the smartest things that Rupert Murdoch ever said. I'll retract that. Murdoch refused to put his newspapers online originally, and everybody else rushed online, and all the content was free, and he was blowing up, and he was right. He says, "You'll regret giving this away," because then it became a long, slow battle to make people realise that you do have to pay for your content, because once you've been getting it for free, you're very reluctant to put your hand in your pocket. But it's a very expensive operation, journalism. Like even, for us covering just the West Indies by that tour, it's got to cost a lot of money in flights, accommodation, food, all that sort of things. And if you want good journalism, you've got to pay for it. Subscription models don't work really well in Australia, but we're blessed, I think, because we've hit that point where people are willing to pay for stuff. And a lot of people used to say at the Australian that they only subscribe to the Australian to read our stuff, because it is a bit of a battle if you're of a certain political disposition, i.e. sensible, to read the Australian. We were lucky on that front. And I don't know where I'm going.
No, pick it up, please. We were a state within the state at the Australia.
I always thought that they had me on hand, because if Phillip Adams ever died, they say, "Oh, sorry, we've still got that one other race." Smaller.
Yeah, so quite a lot of our day would be spent critiquing the Australian, how much we hated writing for it. But then we'd kind of pat each other on the back and say, it's okay, we won't get any of the stink on us. But eventually, I did get tired of I don't necessarily get tired of the Australians' politics. A centre-right newspaper is okay if one has to exist. But I did get tired of the bureaucracy at the paper. I did, and as the rivers of gold have dried up, and as the journalistic model has collapsed in print media, management has got worse and worse, more reactive, more panicky, more distracted, more obsessed with the algorithm, more obsessed with their analytics. What are people reading today? Can we do more of the same? That's why I think newspapers these days sound increasingly the same, because they see what happened yesterday, they see what worked, and they just see they're going to trot out a similar version of exactly what they did the day before. That's why newspapers have become so monotonous and such places of such sort of intellectual conformity. Now, one of the fun parts of newspapers used to be the environment of contestation within them. It was a free space where you could have open conversations, where people didn't stand on ceremony, where things were always pretty informal, often a bit disorganised, but people were generally focused on the outcome. Every 24 hours, you produced a product, and then you started again. And it was kind of fun. That was fun. It was a daily challenge. Now, of course, it's minute by minute, so people are obsessed with what your rivals are doing. Used to be obsessed with what your rivals are doing every 24 hours. Now minute by minute, exactly what everyone else is doing. So there is a massive convergence where people kind of want to produce identical versions of what someone else has done successfully. So it's become a very tired industry and a very defensive industry, desperately trying to hold on to a dwindling number of readers or an ageing demographic at the same time, because the habits of newspaper readership have not been passed down to the next generation. With what we're doing at the moment, we can basically do what we please, and experiment. We're constantly kind of experimenting, and it's also, we might talk about, it's a different kind of writing that we do, I think, for an online publishing platform rather than what we used to do for a newspaper.
Yeah, well, and in it, such as just you read your article. We would talk about you would write an article in the Australian, and it was to the masses, and so you would get this hot, angry breath back at you if you tipped any of those sort of culture war subjects. You just used to do it for fun. You just had to debate them. I mean, every time I had to write a Pat Cummins article, I thought, I'm going to get 200 angry comments here because I'll just drop into something about climate change or, it was poor. It's poor of me to debate like that. But with this venture we have, there's barely an idiot shows up. It feels like a club, doesn't it? The response to our articles, people know, our partners' names, our kids' names, where we were. They come up and talk to us everywhere. It's back to that intimacy again.
Yeah. I mean, the comment section of the Australian, I was always told never go below the line, but it's hard to resist the temptation.
Gideon and I would roll our sleeves up and
we'd go in there. That's why we play in the mud
until the moderators at the newspaper worked it out and then remove all the comments.
So I don't miss that. That was tedious.
You were obsessed by it.
I relished it. I relished the verbal combat, but there does become a limit to it. And I think the other thing was also, I mean, from a personal point of view in newspapers, I like doing different things. And by the time that I'd finished at the Australian, I was doing one thing.
You were hired just as cricket writer.
Yeah, and I was doing it okay. I was doing it satisfactorily. I probably improved year on year, but it wasn't terribly satisfying. And there was no scope within the newspaper to move anywhere else, to write on any of the other subjects that pleased me. So,
you'd had a fight with every section editor.
I had a fight with every section editor. Yeah. So I am a bit contrary, and I push back when I feel as though I don't feel as though people are listening or people understand, and you do get a bit worn out from those kind of conflicts.
Some of the sort of more left field things that we've written have been some of the more popular things.
Yeah.
One of them that you wrote about going to watch aeroplanes with your daughter was.
Yeah. I have a daughter who's on the autism spectrum, and she's obsessed with planes. She's obsessed with civil aviation, with reading Wikipedia entries on all the world's airlines. And I wrote a piece about what it's like to raise a daughter who has a very particular way of seeing the world, and that proved disarmingly popular. I mentioned this morning, some of you might have been here for the opening session today when I talked about my memoir, My Brother Jazz. That started as a post on Cricket et al. People who signed up for the cricket weren't expecting to get a deeply personal essay about the loss of a brother many years ago, but they responded to it very personally and very movingly. So that was the beginning of that project. I couldn't probably have done that project by any other means. It's not the kind of thing that I think fits naturally into a newspaper, and it certainly isn't something that your cricket writer writes.
No, good luck trying to sell my journey to the Nutella stick shed to a second editor of this band.
Exactly.
And I did read a piece that Substack has really caught on in the last sort of 12 months. I think it's gone up from 4 million to 5 million subscribers. And we're dealing with about 10,000 plus subscribers. No, they're not all paid, the 10,000. It's a couple of thousand there. But that's a reasonable audience in a market like Australia. And I think it's an exciting thing. And I already see American business journalists jumping online there, and they're pulling in like $1 million US a year on subscriptions. So in a New York Times article recently, they asked the question, when would the first book be written on Substack? And I thought, well, it already has been. Try and keep up with us. But I don't think it's a great thing, to be honest. I think it's a really good thing for us. I think that our subscribers love it, that they can just get, their favourite cricket writers or whoever and pay their 25 cents or whatever it is to read us. But I think we're losing something by this fracturing of the media environment. We talk about that old school media organisation, newspaper. Even the act of reading a newspaper, you place hopefully the broadsheet page down, and you have what you want to read in there. Maybe you start in the sports section, or you start with cooking, or you start with the world. I don't know, but your eyes are drawn to other stories that you aren't chasing. This doesn't happen so much with the fracturing and sort of subscription-based services that we're in. We're siloing.
But social media does that curating for you now.
Well, the algorithm does it, but you do it voluntarily as well, don't you?
Yeah.
If you just sign up to to this one sort of thought factory.
Yeah, one of the evolving theories is that people are now following journalists rather than following mastheads.
And this is what's happening.
Yeah, so... Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to read us in The Australian, you had to also, support Janet Albrechtsen. So some people drew the line at that. There were actually people who told me that I'd love to read you in The Australian. I just can't bear it. Yeah. I just cannot possibly be complicit in that model. And, I was always kind of sympathetic with that. Sometimes I felt the same way.
The question we're both asking. How
did you do it? How did you live so long?
And look, not to dump on The Australian, really, because, the question often asked is, how can somebody with your politics work at The Australian? I said, well, equally, it's asked, how does The Australian employ somebody with more politics? I point out I was never, it was a cricket station that sacked me for my social media. The Australian never spoke to me once about those sorts of things, and did grant me a lot of freedoms on that front.
Yeah. I did get the feeling towards the end of my time at the Oz that things were about to change, that things were getting harder. And I wasn't prepared to be part of that.
It's the culture wars as a business model. It's this, it's this insistence that you do more with less. So, hey, here's every research fellow at the IPA with a thought on how someone's stealing Christmas or God knows what. Yeah. So they can fill up the op-ed pages. It's cheap. It's content. It's cheap. Yeah. And it's clickbait as well. Culture wars. It makes you angry or it's an affirming thing, but you're driven to that thing. That's part of the problem with sort of data-driven journalism. Having said that, we look at our numbers all the time now. We're not driven by them.
We're not driven by them.
I'm sure we're influenced by them. Our abiding principles, we write about what we want to write about, not what we think people want to read.
There's a line in Claude Coburn's autobiography. Claude Coburn was a very distinguished left-wing British journalist, and he wrote an autobiography called I, Claude, and he wrote in it, he talked about the way in which market research had pervaded newspapers. And this is in the 1960s, he's saying. A lot of people walking around claiming that they know exactly what the public wants. And his line was, an editor has no business publishing what the public wants to read. He should publish what he wants to read and convince the public to be interested in it. And I always thought that was a really good rule of thumb, because I always thought if the readers are smart enough to realise that if you're producing something merely to pander to them, if you're simply recycling their thoughts and selling them back to them, I don't think about what's going to pop. I don't think about what's going to be popular. I think about what I want to do and what I would like to read if I was an ideal reader. And I'm hopeful that we now have a constituency out there who have bought into that philosophy, who are prepared to be delighted, actually, by what comes into their inbox in the morning. I didn't expect to read that. I didn't know I'd be interested in that, but now I am.
And we go way off, Piers. I think I wrote a piece recently about St. Francis Assisi. St. Francis.
Yeah.
I just got down. I went down some rabbit hole, and we're allowed to go down rabbit holes. And people seem to enjoy that. Yeah. I think, essentially.
Well, we enjoy it. And I think if we're enjoying it, then the chances are that they will be enjoying it too. I think people can tell when you're just faking it. People can tell when you're just going through the motions. I'm doing it because I want to, and I'll do it for as long as I want to, and then I probably will give up and do something else. It's obviously something that's also probably got a finite lifespan.
One of the things I found interesting was going into the last summer that it's still you have the same trigger points that the old media, that legacy media has. Remember when I broke the Cameron?
You did the Cameron Green story, yeah.
It's really sad for someone of my age, but I still get really excited about breaking stories.
He does.
I'm just, a sort of reptilian journalist. I want to tell something. I want to be the first to tell people things. It's always driven me. And I thought, I've got this story that might mean nothing to you, or it may mean something. Cameron Green was out for the summer. It was a pretty big story. I thought, how do you break a story in a newsletter? I had no idea. And it went gangbusters, didn't it? The response that story.
We created the logo, the breaking logo.
Breaking news. It still works.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's a red flag. Yeah.
What do we want to do? What's the time?
It's 12:10, and Sue can actually tell us how much longer we've got to go, because we'll just ramble on indefinitely unless you stop us. Sure, yeah.
So should we do questions?
We're happy to do questions, yeah.
Questions, great. Let's have questions. If you want.
So Gideon gets the hard ones.
That's got to be a hard one. I used to be an avid newspaper reader, and I don't read any of them anymore.
Yeah, right.
Because I don't trust them. I don't want to be commodified, and I don't want to be told what I'm to think. I want to be presented with different ideas.
How do you find those ideas now? How do you curate that sort of?
Speaking with people.
Yeah, right.
And so that means it limits me more to the people that I know. Or trying to find somebody who I might trust. To me, there's been a massive change in the media. I no longer trust it. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about what's happening between Murdoch and Trump. And what that is going to mean for media. Because each of them is telling us what we should be thinking. And I don't agree. I'm on your side.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why there has been that change in tone to the media is economically driven. Because journalism is expensive, but comment is cheap. And if you want to fill your newspapers in an economical fashion, one of the ways that you do it is you fill it with columns of pundits, endless serried ranks of pundits, often preaching more or less from the same song sheet, giving the newspaper an ideological cant that's meant to please, to gratify those readers that the newspaper wants to hold on to. But journalism is hard. Journalism is slow. Journalism actually requires an awful lot of work and an awful lot of expertise and a preparedness to reach conclusions that are surprising, that sometimes are at odds with your readers' sympathies, with your readers' sensibilities. And that's actually a troubling part of newspapers these days. Their desperate, almost pathetic desire to please those readers that they already have, not to furnish them with inconvenient truths that they've found out by means of investigation. As for what's happening with Murdoch and Trump, well, Murdoch doesn't like Trump. I mean, personally, this is a personal animus. He holds him in contempt. He has also realised, paradoxically, that Trump is very good for business. So you have this News Limited in the United States has taken on this weird hybrid identity where Fox continues to be a kind of a loudhailer for the MAGA movement. But the Wall Street Journal has actually kind of preserved its independence, has continued to write quite aggressively against Trump, specifically on his economic policies, but also on some of his cultural policies. And it's actually thrown a lot of resources at this Epstein story, much to Trump's chagrin. That story hasn't come out of the New York Times, his traditional, liberal opponents. It's come from basically a newspaper, one of the first newspapers that that Trump would read every day, the Bible of Wall Street. So that hurts Trump, and he's angry about it, and he's pushing aggressively back. And look, I'll give Murdoch his due. He's standing firm about it. He's been sued for $10 billion by Trump, but they have not blinked. And the editor got pressure directly from Trump not to publish the stories about Epstein, but she went ahead and did it. There is part of Rupert that his ideological clothing is it's a means by which he, I think, judges other people. What you believe is a kind of an index of your personality, of your sentimentality. But there is an irreducible part of Murdoch that is an ink-stained wretch that loves newspapers, that loves a great story. It's a little bit like Peter Law.
Yeah, you're right though. It's that old school thing that I used to see them do at state premiers and things like that. I've put us, keep them really close, then bang, shot across the bow, the backhander. It's kind of the bully tactic, and I think in some ways, as you say, Murdoch doesn't like Trump, and actually probably they're banging foreheads together. The most terrifying thing I think I've read recently, and I can't remember if it's the New York or the New York Times, but it was the account of the Murdoch family going through court. The Murdoch family. Now, I had always assumed that the Murdochs were driven by a desire to make money and to be powerful, and were lockstep on those things. But I noticed in these transcripts, the son, Lachlan, talking about this whole we are protecting Western civilization. We are Western civilization's last hope is in the conservative media in America, and that's that kind of messianic thing that is really troubling. That I'm not sure Rupert would go that far.
No, and I don't think the other members of the family don't agree.
It was a fascinating article because what actually split the members of the Murdoch family away from Lachlan, the other siblings, was his appointment of Tony Abbott to the board of Fox.
Yeah,
his sisters just said, "What? That is just such poor judgment." But he stood by it, and this is his whole thing that they've got now. Abbott, and Gretchen, and all these guys. They actually think they're out there fighting the fight for Western civilization, rather than being journalists and breaking news and telling stories. And I get this. I reckon we've become more media literate. So the media, there's much more critique of the media, by the media, within the media, and I think readers have become more sophisticated, and hence the loss of trust. I feel exactly the same thing. I stopped reading the Washington Post. They lost me when they couldn't even, put out an editorial collection. I kind of read the New York Times, sadly, because I know that it has let people down so many times on big stories, and the weapons of mass destruction, those sorts of things like that. It's a pretty grim time in the traditional media. I don't know where you find who you trust, and maybe that's why people are subscribing on Substacks. And hey, ironically, I find one of my best sources of information is Twitter. I know it appalls you, but we only have to look at this situation in the Middle East. Journalists can't cover it. Journalists aren't allowed to go to Gaza, but it's through Twitter that we know what's going on there. I know it's a shit pub. It's full of shit people, and the worst people you ever want to meet. But it also it's found a funny niche in there. I'm surprised that Elon has let it run like it has. But I'll give Elon a tip on that.
Elon's had a few distractions lately.
Yeah.
I mean, but not everything is explained by it's cock up beats conspiracy 99 times out of 100. A lot of the inadequacies of newspapers are actually caused by the shortcomings of journalists. And never we should never fail to acknowledge that people are always in the business of trying to mislead newspapers. They're never going to tell you the same story twice. They're never going to set the story straight. They're going to tell you a version of the story that suits them. And often it can be about, in journalism, it can be about choosing between multiple different versions of the story, each kind of in their way equally convincing, but each based on a selective choice of information. And in the end, you kind of have to toss a coin sometimes as to who you believe, whose version of the story you give the greatest trust to. And sometimes, frankly, you're wrong. And you have to be prepared to... journalists should be humble, I think, in the face of the overwhelming amount of information that there is out there, the relative recency into which they've entered a story, the fact that a lot of people know a story far, far better than you ever will, and yet in the end, weirdly, more members of the public will read your version of the story than anybody else's. Any else of these well-credentialed experts or people who with an inside perspective on things. It's a very, very imperfect science, and maybe we're apt to pretend otherwise because it suits us. But I always find myself up against the limits of my knowledge and having to exercise personal judgment on things that sometimes make me feel uncomfortable. How are we going, Sue? Any other questions?
I think I can see a hand up there. Somebody's just been to the house.
What's been from the Australian cricket team since you've gone into new media? And personally, how have you felt it? Has anything changed?
It's a good question, actually.
Well, Cricket Australia kind of, and the cricket bodies that dictate whether you get into a press box and all those sorts of things, they respect us, so that they still look after us. I mean, there are now 10,000 people who reckon that they publish on a website who want to get into a press box and have free lunch. We're still at the front of that queue this far. No, I don't think the cricketers have changed very much in their attitude to us. Generally, they didn't really engage that much with what we wrote anyway. They kind of oblivious of everything except what appears on TikTok.
Yeah, I think, to most players, except, some of the more perceptive ones, we're sort of indistinguishable.
Yeah.
We're just sort of a grey mass.
I remember Marnus Labuschagne said to me one day, they were at the Nets at Christmas, and I was walking by, he said, "What'd you write today, Pete?" And I went, I couldn't remember. And he said, and he turned to Tim Payne, he said, Pete's potted us. He's had a go at the team and he won't admit it. And I said, well, I'm very confident that if I have, you guys won't read it because I know you're all too tight to subscribe to the Australian. And I said, no, I use my uncle's subscription. I'll read it. The players never subscribe.
No,
we gave David Warner a free subscription to the Australian at one point.
Well, I think he's a subscriber now, isn't he?
To the Australian?
Yeah, no, to us.
You wouldn't have paid.
No, I think you gave it to him. Pat Cummins is subscribed. Gilchrist is subscribed, pleased me the other day.
Did he?
Yeah. And he's tight. He's died with his first dollar, Kelly. I mean, it's interesting. We're not writing for the players, though. We don't perceive ourselves to be writing for the players. They're the furthest people from my thoughts when I file a story.
Because media engagements change too. They're not reading newspaper headlines anymore.
Yeah.
They're more interested in what sort of latest funny clip they've got on the grade cricketer, or it really has boiled down to that.
Yeah, it has. I think the other thing is something that's always been influential in my thinking is that I play cricket. I still play cricket. Play for a club. I've been in this club for 32 years. I put my inadequate skills to the test every weekend during summer. I often come away disappointed. Occasionally I come away satisfied. I know that the game feels really different when you're in it compared to when you're watching. And it's a cussed game. It's a difficult game. It's an emotionally fraught game, even at the ridiculous level that I play at. So I've always felt a certain sympathy, a certain simpatico with the players undergoing that ordeal in the blaze of public attention. I know that the gap between success and failure is tiny. I know that no one is tougher on your performances than you are. Anything I say about what a cricketer's done will be nothing compared to the inquest they conduct into their own performances. So I'm very slow to condemn. I'm very reluctant to say this guy should be out or this guy should be in. I always think there's a shade of grey in there that you have to be prepared to occupy. It's an uncomfortable space sometimes when you feel as though you're not making a decision that maybe you have to. But you also think, in the end, what really rides on what I say.
Forgiving, that's right about Gideon.
Yeah.
Yeah. It allows more sort of diversion, breadth, and diversity than perhaps any other sport in a way.
There's a game going on.
Stop.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Sue.
Jump up on the stage and do this.
Okay, all right, we're going on a roll.
Very nice of everybody to turn out.
All right, that's all we've got time for on Cricket
Thank you
Hotel
for coming
today.
out on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And I, for one, was side stage and just hoping you'd continue. I would have had a question too. Can I throw a quick one in? The podcast, do you edit?
No.
No,
it's more so we just turn it on, and usually the discussion is, what are we going to talk about?
Exactly.
The answer is cricket.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. And
So if you like what you heard today, this is exactly what we do on the podcast.
Yeah.
It is. I can highly recommend the podcast. I'm excited about the website. Subscribe to that Substack, the website, the podcast.
Send money.
Yeah.
Send money.
Send lawyers guns and money.
Would you please thank Gideon Hay and Peter Laura, Peter Williams